Overconfidence, or even just misplaced confidence, can seriously screw up a hunt. Last year, I decided to try my hand at turkey hunting for the first time. I knew that an over-the-counter hunt with my bow for these birds that can see better than we can even comprehend wasn't going to be easy per se, but I never imagined it would be as difficult as it was. I was heading up to an area I've elk hunted numerous times, and every single time I've chased elk through those woods, I ran into turkeys. I figured I'd hike out to a familiar spot, send out some turkey calls, watch one walk in, shoot it, and go home ready for Thanksgiving. Man, did I ever underestimate these tricky and elusive birds.
Well, there's nothing out here. I've been calling about every 10 minutes for the last hour and change. No gobbles, no sights of anything, nothing. Just been staring at my decoys, sitting halfway in the shade, talking to the Sudmain Raisins girls. She's actually super pissed that there was never an 80s claymation version of her. Those stupid raisins got all the glory. Anyway, I'm going to pack up all this stuff, and I have a loop in mind to kind of check some water and just circle this area. If I don't find any turkeys in here today, find some different woods tomorrow. But still got some morning hours, so I might go about a mile, find another good spot, set up for a bit, call and wait, and then just keep on moving. Well, I made it to the next spot I wanted to get to. It's this huge clearing with a giant tank at the end of it, where 2 years ago, during elk season, I was sitting in this water one evening and saw, I think, 2 different flocks of turkeys just meander through the grass. Again, the theme of this hunt is that fall turkey range is not the same as spring turkey range, but I hadn't been over this far west and figured it was worth a shot. The sad thing is this tank, which is one of the bigger ones in the area and I figured would be reliable, is totally dried up. So if they're looking for water, they're not coming here. So I'm just going to sit here in the shade for a minute, take a load off, maybe get a snack, pick some dandelions if I feel like it, and look at my map and figure out what to do next. I hadn't hiked far up the mountain when I found a nice little clearing to set up on. I just set the hen out there at about 20 yards and then started some light clucking. I had only done 2 or 3 sets of calls when I caught a turkey coming in out of the corner of my eye. Unfortunately, I spooked him on his way into the decoy, and he was not going to be called back after that. I packed up my stuff, bounced around the mountain from spot to spot for the rest of the evening, and then went home to lick my wounds.
The rest of the hunt wasn't much better. I checked different mountains, put miles and miles on my boots, and despite a second encounter with a pair of birds, was never able to get within shooting range of a turkey. In the end, I learned a lot. I was able to call a bird into my general area, and spent 3 days in God's amazing creation. Not too shabby. As I drove back home, though, I couldn't help but chuckle at the me from 3 days prior, who thought this would be a relatively easy hunt. If it weren't for that overconfidence, I probably would have done a lot more research and potentially had a much more successful hunt. Live and learn, I guess.
Tonight, I actually want to start off with a different hunting story. My first ever big game kill was a mule deer in Arizona a few years ago, and it did not go as planned. It was embarrassing, it was disastrous. Ultimately, a deer did end up in my freezer, but it was not pretty. And it's because I put all my hopes, all my eggs in the basket of a new rifle that I purchased for this hunt. I'm married into hunting. I didn't come from a hunting background. In fact, I have distinct memories of going to Boy Scout camp, falling in love with the shooting range. I went there every day, just target practice. I came home and started begging my parents for a BB gun. Like, just give me something. And they were convinced, probably rightly so, that I would shoot my siblings, and they did not let me have one. So I was just, I entered the hunting world like, hey, cool, I'm happy to go hunting with my father-in-law, but I don't have anything with which to kill an animal. So the first few months I just went with this old borrowed rifle that he had sitting around somewhere, and it was fine, but never killed an animal with it. So I told myself, after a couple of years where I didn't get drawn for any tags, that okay, the next time I get drawn, I'm buying myself a nice rifle. So sure enough, I got drawn. I bought the rifle, I bought the scope, then I put it all together, mounted it myself, which is an important part of the story because I learned something very important. If you know at all about rifles, the way the scope is mounted is extremely important. They're finesse instruments, and there's a very specific torque in inch-pounds that you're supposed to mount the thing. There's like a special little torque screwdriver that you use, and I'm a DIY guy, but I'm also super cheap. So, I was putting this all together, I'm like, I'm not buying this thing, like surely my forearm can decide what 18 inch-pounds is, like it'll know. So I cranked that scope down way tighter than it needed to be, and what happens then is you like adjust the geometry within that scope, and you get, it's not like it just misses all the time, you get super inconsistent shots with that. Like you'll hit dead center, and the next one will be 2 feet off, and it's all over the place. It's crazy. But this was my problem. So I go out for the hunt with this new rifle, and on day one, we show up for the afternoon hunt at the same farm that I was hunting with my wife. This was before that. And my father-in-law, we get out of the Jeep, and I'm scanning this alfalfa field, and I see that's kind of weird brown, like sticky bush thing. Like that doesn't look like it should be there. So I pull out my binoculars, and I'm like, hey Neil, can you take, are these antlers? And he looks out, it's just this huge rack. This thing is just bedded down, taking a nap in the field, and these giant antlers are sticking up above it, like, oh, this is beautiful. Because eventually, in a little bit, he's going to get up to pee or get up to start feeding again or whatever. He's going to stand up, and we're going to kill him. So we move around, we find the spot, and we kind of lay down in this prone position off to the side. We're just staring through our scopes at his antlers, waiting for him to stand up. My father-in-law tells me, okay, buddy, you've got the first shot. But if you miss, prepare yourself for the sound of more shots, because he's going to take it, which is totally fair. It's hunting protocol. So finally we're staring at this, and this giant buck stands up. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's huge, it's amazing. Lined up right on, I crack off a shot. Deer does it, he just looks around. Nothing going on. My father-in-law, the experienced hunter with the better rifle, puts him down and has this magnificent buck that still hangs on this wall. It's incredible. Later that evening, we're in the process of quartering and cleaning up, skinning his animal, and I look across the field, and there's this other giant buck who's standing in the field looking at us like, hey, what are you doing to Fred over there? That's kind of weird. And so I'm like, oh, sweet, okay, so I leave my father-in-law skinning his deer, I grab my rifle and run over, it holds 3 rounds, and I line up on him, and I crack 3 shots off, and nothing. Deer doesn't care, I'm missing by a mile. I am so frustrated that I've now missed 2 giant bucks with this stupid rifle. So the next morning, we skip the hunt. We go to the desert, we try to sight back in, and I'm hitting like right on paper, then a foot off, then right back where it needs to be, then 3 feet off. Like it's all over the place. And what I should have done, the ethical thing to do, be like, well, this rifle's a piece of crap. Neil, you don't need it anymore because you just killed your buck. Let me borrow yours. I'm too arrogant and prideful, and I just bought this rifle for this hunt. I need to kill the deer with this rifle. So stupid in hindsight. So we show up. 3rd morning. The sun is just rising. We're facing into the sun, which is a mistake, but it was just the way it was set up. And suddenly I can start to see the deer, and I see this huge deer off on the edge of the field. He's about up to the fence where he's going to hop into the desert. And I go to line up on him, and there's glare in my scope, so I can't see him. It's all blurry. I'm fighting this. I'm trying to get different angles. I finally get there. I take a shot. Nothing. My father-in-law's watching through binoculars, just telling me, just reading the play-by-play, like missed, bam, missed. Bam, missed. Shut up, I know I missed. So what happens, rewind just a second. That morning we got to the Jeep. I used a whole box of ammunition the day before sighting in. I now have 8 bullets to my name. The gun I have 2 magazines that hold 3, and I was going to put an extra one in the chamber, so I had 4 in the gun, because apparently it was taking me a little bit to shoot a deer. So I'm gathering all this stuff, and I have this 1 extra bullet. And I'm like, what am I? I'm not carrying a loose bullet in my pocket. Like, I'm not Barney Fife. Who's going to need this? So I toss it in the side of the Jeep, and we move on. Take 3 shots at this deer, nothing. He hops over the fence. And I look and there's all these other does moving around, and they're not like sprinting off. They're moving around, they're kind of nervous, but they can't figure out what's going on. And in there I see this other pretty decent buck. So I'm like, okay, here we go, another chance. There's now one bullet in my gun. I changed magazines, so I have a magazine with one bullet, a fresh one in the gun. And my father-in-law's like, okay, buddy, take your time. He's coaching me like a child. Like, just take some deep breaths, calm down, you can do this. He's whispering, and I can tell he's masking frustration. Like, this kid is an idiot. I let my daughter marry an idiot. What is wrong with this guy? And so I take a shot. He's like, missed low. Take another shot, missed left. Take a third shot, and the whole time, like I take a shot, he moves around, the does move around, I have to wait till it's clear, then I take another one, and all this is going on. He's whispering, trying to not spook them off. Third shot, there's a sound when you shoot and then you hit an animal. That you hear the sound of the rifle and you hear like this thwack of it hitting his body. So I hear that sound, but he doesn't drop. And he's like, okay, you hit him. But he's not, okay, you're gonna have to put another one in him. He's not down. So now I'm looking at that like, okay, I hit him. I have, this gun's empty. Here's this one bullet in this magazine. I put it in. And I'm lining, and I'm not even taking time to range him. He's probably over 300 yards away now. So I'm like, okay, just put it the same aiming point as last time. Taking all the deep breaths I can. I shoot. He's like, you missed left. And now I'm in a predicament because I have one bullet in my possession, and it's half a mile behind us at the Jeep because I left it there this morning, thinking who would possibly need this bullet. I would need this bullet. I found out. So he's sitting there, and he doesn't know this is the problem. So he's watching the binoculars. He's like, shoot him again. Whenever you're ready, take your shot. And I'm sitting here trying to think, how do I tell this man that I'm out of bullets? And there's now a wounded deer in the field. So finally I lean over, I'm like, I'm out of bullets. And he gives up on whispering and says, you're what? I have one more, but it's back in the Jeep. He's like, well, looks like you're going back to the Jeep. Okay, yes sir. And so I leave all my stuff. He sits there, he's like, I'm just going to watch it and make sure it doesn't run off. So he just sits there at the blind, watching through binoculars while I run a half mile back to the Jeep. We're not even worried about being sneaky anymore, so I just drive the Jeep back up to where we are. I'm desperate at this point. I hop out, I grab that bullet, I grab my gun, and I'm not going to play around with this 300-yard nonsense anymore. I drop into this field behind this berm, and I crawl like all the way up to the edge where I can pop up and get a range, and he's standing out there at 160 yards. I'm like, okay, this is my last bullet. This is as close as I can get. If this doesn't work, I have a pistol on my side. I guess I can run out there like John Wick and try to, assassinate him, but it's probably not going to work so well. So I put one in, and I'm taking all the deep breaths I can, and I am trying to think of a time I've prayed harder in my life. But I am praying, because from an ethical hunter standpoint, I feel bad this deer is now wounded, and I just want to, put him down. So I'm feeling awful, and I'm just taking all these breaths and praying to God, and finally crack one off, and down he goes, went right where it needed to go, and it was magnificent. However, my father-in-law still, of all the stories he loves to tell, that is his favorite story. And I can't blame him. The time his idiot son-in-law finally shot a deer with his new fancy rifle. Fun fact, I don't have that rifle anymore. I got rid of it, and now have one that's set up properly and works well. Here's the point, the problem. I put my faith in stuff, so to speak, for that. This rifle was the answer, was the ticket, was going to be the reason I hadn't shot a deer up to that point was surely this borrowed rifle, not the fact that I didn't put a lot of time in or hadn't seen enough deer. It was because I didn't have a fancy rifle. And I think what a lot of us do, sometimes in the name of security, in the name of sound financial planning or whatever, we start to put our trust in stuff, in money. And it doesn't matter if you are, which tax bracket you're in, if you are sitting on, a portfolio and you have all this stuff, or you're wondering like, okay, where's my next rent check coming from? All of us have a real strong tendency to seek our security from money, from our job, from this position, from this pay bump, from whatever. We want more, and we tend to not call it greed, we call it, I'm just trying to provide security for my family. Or I'm just trying to bank up some stuff for a rainy day, or all of which can be great financial decisions to make. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with that is when we put our faith in that instead of Jesus, the ultimate source of all that stuff. And I think I'm not a big fan of just rattling off statistics, but there are some that are staggering about how much we as a society like stuff. The U.S. consumer debt, all the consumer debt of all of U.S. citizens is at $3.9 trillion. Trillion with a T. Just under 4 trillion. I can't even imagine that many zeros. The average household car loan is for $29,000. And the average household credit card debt is sitting at $16,000. That's so much money. Those are averages. I realize not everyone lives that way, but because they're averages, that means there are some people with zero and some people that have twice that much. It is crazy how much we like stuff and seek security in money and stuff. There's the old phrase that we buy stuff we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. That's what we do. Like well, man, they got a nice new truck. Look at me with this piece of junk over here. I should probably go get a new truck. And we do that. We think, no, I've justified more car purchases on like, you know what, my wife needs a good, reliable car. And really, I should probably just fix the car she has. But we start to put this label, this like, no, it's in the name of security. It's the wise thing to do. It's what I should do. And we begin to trust in our wealth or our ability to earn money rather than when seeking Jesus. And we're going to look at a guy tonight that I'm sure you've read before. In Matthew 19, it's a common story where Jesus encounters who's usually called the rich young ruler. So he's this young guy who has done really well for himself, and he's kind of the ancient equivalent of one of these like millennial kids that develops an app that makes him millions of dollars and he doesn't even have to do anything for it. Well, he's that guy. Super young, super successful. But also a Jew and knows the Old Testament and tries to faithfully serve God. And he somehow catches wind of Jesus and is intrigued by his message, he knows there's something different about him. And so he comes up, probably hoping to justify himself and maybe even impress Jesus a little bit. But he comes up and kind of asks him, he calls him good teacher in one version of this story, but says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Essentially, he's saying, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm doing a great job, but I just want to confirm I'm doing a great job, right? And so Jesus kind of gives him a surface answer at first, just says, well, you know the commandments, and he rattles off a few 10 commandments, honor your father and mother, don't steal, he lists a few, and the guy's like, oh, that's what I thought you would say. Great, I've done all that since I'm a kid, so we're good? We're good, right? We're good. And Jesus realized, like, okay, right, you asked, you're the one to go, and he knows him, and I believe it's easy to read this story with Jesus kind of having a tone of judgment or condescension, which I don't think we ever see from Jesus unless he's talking to religious leaders. And I think he actually had real compassion for this man. And he could see that this guy is all wrapped up in his stuff, in his wealth. And that these guys are just checking off boxes, like making sure, okay, I got the God box good, I got the money box good, okay, just make sure everything's in line. And he says, well, there's one thing you lack. Go and sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, and then come and follow me. And some of the saddest words written in the Bible, when it says that the young man went away sad because he had many possessions. That he is literally invited to follow Jesus in the flesh, and he wasn't willing to take that step. He chose his wealth, he chose his stuff, he chose his lifestyle over that. Which I've often, for years I read this story and just thought, man, what a douche. Like, who does that? Come on, man, it's just stuff. Like, this is Jesus you're talking about. But I think he really is a sad story. And I think Jesus felt legitimate compassion when he walked away and felt sadness for him, because Jesus was offering him something so much more, and he wasn't willing to let that go. He wasn't willing to trust that Jesus would actually give him something better than what he thought he already had. And he certainly wasn't recognizing that God was ultimately the source of everything he had, and it could all be gone tomorrow. And so I try to not be so hard on this guy, because I think, honestly, I'm probably a lot more like this guy than I want to recognize. I think a lot of us are. And what I want to kind of focus in on tonight is, I know it's weird to spend a lot of time talking about money at a men's retreat, but I think it's there's a short list of areas that I think trip guys up all the time. And this idea of money or security or wealth or whatever, I think is one of the huge ones that tends to stunt our growth, that tends to hold us back from what Jesus wants because we're fixated on it, or we're clinging to it, or we just get ourselves all turned around in this area. And I think money is one of possibly the greatest trust exercise we can be engaged in. When it comes to trusting Jesus, when we talk about faith not being just a Sunday school word, but actually being living and something that we act out because we have something on the line, I think money is honestly the best way we can put that on the line. We can act out on our faith. Because we love money because it can provide us perceived freedom. Like, I can buy this, I can go here, I can do that. I can make my own decisions because I have the money to make that decision. And we love it because it brings us this sense of security. Like, okay, if the AC goes out, I've got some money sitting over here. Or, I'm stocking away for retirement because then I'm really gonna live. Like right now I'm just gonna work and keep plugging away and things might not be great, but at this someday, I'm sitting on a beach, sipping a Mai Tai, just not a care in the world. And we put all our hope in that. And I think we do so to the detriment of recognizing just how much we need Jesus for every breath we take and every meal that we get. And that I think it's easier in lean times to really recognize, oh my gosh, I really need God because I don't know where my next check is coming from. But once we get even just a little bit of consistency and security, it's real easy to think, I did this, I created this, I made this. Thanks God, I'll let you know when I need something again, but I got this. And I'm always, one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture is when Jesus is he's talking about money again, because he talked about it a lot because it's such a big issue for our hearts. And he talks about the birds of the air, the lilies of the field. And he's talking about, why do you worry so much about what are you going to eat, what are you going to wear, all these basic needs that most of us just kind of take for granted. He says, why do you worry about that? Look at these animals. Like, we've got deer running around and fighting in front of us here, which is awesome. If you haven't seen the pictures, he's got great pictures of deer fighting each other. I'm so excited and jealous I wasn't there. But, like, you've got all these deer walking through camp they don't have a 401k. They don't have like a little hole in a tree where they're stocking things away. Like, they're walking through and they get their sustenance every day because God provides it. And Jesus says, like, how much more important are you to God than any of these creations that are so amply supplied? And we forget that, and we think, okay, I've got what I need, I've got this, but God, if I could really have this, or if I just this one more step, just this one more thing, or if I'm living here now and that's okay, but man, I would love if I could just step up to this. And that gives us this sense of like, okay, if I could just have this, then it's all going to be fine. And it's often not. It's often just leading us deeper into a trap where we trust God less with our money, and therefore we trust Him less with our lives and our futures and our kids and our families. And I think if we can't learn to trust God with our money, it's going to be really hard to learn to trust Him in a lot of other less tangible areas. And so I want to ask and just kind of throw out a question for you to chew on and wrestle with God is, are you trusting God with your money? Specifically, are you demonstrating that trust and that faith by tithing, by giving back to God? I feel like I should say, like, Chuck did not ask me to say that. And I benefit absolutely zero if you start tithing at First Christian. But I say that, and I challenge you with that, because I believe it's such a fundamentally profound experience for each of our hearts to trust God in that way. To trust God in that way when it doesn't even make sense numerically, and you think, God, I'm hardly making it on 100% of what I make, and you want me to take 10% of what I make and hand it to you and figure out how to live on the 90? And God says, yeah, that's how it works. And there's an old kind of cheesy saying, but I've seen it be true in my life over and over again, that 90% with God goes farther than 100% without Him. There's just ways that things work out and come together, and when you drop that money in or hand over that check and you just think, I'm giving you this, God, but I don't know if I'm going to make rent. He has a way of making rent. Right. He has a way of making that happen. And I think, like, I don't want to tell an exhaustive story, but I know Sarah and I went through some real lean times when our son was first born. Because I left First Christian, went to St. Louis to be a youth pastor. Anybody here from St. Louis? Sweet. St. Louis sucks. I had to check. Just totally different culture. There were a lot of problems. I was young, the culture, I was miserable at work. Sarah was miserable being away from her family. It was just a couple of years of being miserable. And then we got pregnant with our first son, and it got a lot harder. And ultimately, we came to a point where I just realized, like, this isn't going to work. We have to get back. So I started interviewing at churches and looking for the next thing. And the church I was at was very gracious, very generous to us, but they also understandably said, like, okay, well, we're not just going to keep you on staff forever while you look for your next job. So we set an end date. And our son was born, and 6 weeks later, we were heading into U-Haul back to Phoenix, and I didn't have a job yet. And so we moved in with her folks, and let me tell you, if there's anything better than marrying a girl and 6 months later moving her 1,500 miles away from her family, it's coming back when you've knocked her up and asking to live there with her parents. It was just a real boost to the manly feelings, you know? My in-laws are terrific people. They were very gracious about the whole thing, but it felt, you know, your balls just shrink a whole lot in that situation. But, so we're living there and just trying to figure out, okay, what are we gonna do? Like, we have a roof over our heads because God's providing through my in-laws, but like, we have a baby, we need food, we have bills to pay. We were kind of drowning in a lot of debt because we made a lot of stupid early married decisions, and God provided. Through a contact at FCC, actually, I started selling drums part-time at Guitar Center, which is very glamorous. But through that job, I met a guy who's still a friend today who works at CCV, and he was about to leave Guitar Center to go work be a youth pastor at a church. He's like, hey, we actually need someone part-time to help with kids if you want to come do that. I'm like, well, yeah, I suck as a drum salesman, so let's go do that. And then I did a favor for somebody, just played guitar for something at this weird random thing, and that led to a part-time job teaching music at a school, and then all these jobs started coming together, and my wife, who had worked at Starbucks before, got connected with her old manager and landed a job there, and one by one, God just like helped us get by till by the fall of that year, I had landed at my next full-time ministry at a great church that I loved, and we served for years there. And at the end of that year, where that started with, oh my gosh, my job's about to end and I don't know what we're going to do, at tax time we filed 6 W-2s because God had just provided all these random things, and not one of them was like hey, I just went in and blindly applied. They were all connected from some friend of the stuff that can only be God orchestrating that. And it was certainly a lean time, but we never starved. We didn't go bankrupt. God just gave us just enough when we needed it to get us through. And through that whole process, as lean as it was, and there were so many times I was so tempted, and we're writing a tithe check, I'm like, God, I could really use this money. I can think of 19 things I need to do with this money right now. But we just committed, we're going to stay faithful, and we kept trusting God with that, and He provided everything we needed. And so what I want to just kind of challenge you or throw out there is that this issue of money, while it may seem just like, it seems like a box on a shelf, right? And even if Jesus is the shelf, it's still just like, it's an area. I think this particular area bleeds over into so many other areas of our lives. And if we can learn to trust God and just physically hand that part of our lives over to Him, all these other things become a lot easier to surrender. And our faith grows so much because we just see Him in these real practical, tangible ways. If you just write down the ways that God provides when you're trusting Him with money, it's incredible. The list gets so long so fast because that's the kind of God we serve. And the story after the young man leaves Jesus' presence is where Jesus goes on and he starts talking about how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. And he does the classic line that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I think whether you're in here and you think, yeah, okay, well, I'm not a rich man, most of us probably feel that we're not. You could argue, if you look globally, that if you have access to indoor plumbing, you could be considered rich by global standards. That we are very blessed by where we live, no matter what our situation is right now. And that gives me caution, like, oh man, okay, well, if I look at it that way, like I think of rich and I think of, the one percenters and all that kind of stuff. But I think, man, compared to the rest of the world, I would fall into that category. And I don't want to be a camel trying to squeeze through the eye of a needle. And this phrase, this kind of joke almost that Jesus makes causes Peter to kind of freak out, because Peter always freaked out. And he said, okay, well, wow, that's pretty rough, Jesus. What about us? Which was one of Jesus' favorite questions, or Peter's favorite questions. He said, we've left everything to follow you. What are we going to get? And Jesus kind of gives this semi-long description of treasure in the kingdom of heaven and what is ultimately coming for them that is so much greater. And he even says anyone who's given up, families or houses or land or any of that stuff will be given back 100 times more what they've given for the kingdom. And Jesus was speaking, I'm not saying, you give $10 to Jesus, $100 is showing up. He's not giving you like a mathematical equation, though that was bad math, because it'd be $1,000 that shows up. Anyway, I went to Bible college. We didn't have to take math. Storing up treasure in heaven, so to speak, or just spiritual blessings in this life is so much more valuable than monetary possessions. Because God doesn't actually he's not doing this because he wants your money. It's not because he's like, okay, I got this idea called the church, we're going to start the church, and the church is going to need money to run, so I'm going to invent this thing called tithing. That's not what God did when he orchestrated this. He wants our hearts. And another portion where Jesus is speaking about money, he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, which is so true. I remember a time a couple of years ago where Sarah and I were kind of moving some savings around and shifting some stuff, and I said, you know what, I want to take like a small little, I want to take $500, and I want to start messing around with some stock market stuff, because I'm a grown-up, and that's what grown-ups are supposed to do. And so I found this thing, I did some research, and I just invested a little bit, so just take this part, and I'm just going to throw it here in a couple of these stocks and these little pseudo-mutual fund things, and I'm so sophisticated, I'm smart, I'm going to make a fortune, it's going to be wonderful. And what happened instantly is that I started obsessing about these companies. These companies I was invested in, that I had, other than a little bit of money invested in their stock, I had no affiliation with. They were on my mind constantly. I would wake up and grab my phone, and instead of okay, time to pull up the Bible and start my day right, I'd be checking for news reports on how that company is doing, or what mergers might be happening, or all this stupid, boring stuff that I used to think was dumb, and now it's all I think about. And multiple times throughout the day, I'd be like, okay, I should just go check, see how things are going today. And I started obsessing over it, because I had this small amount of money invested over here, and so my heart followed that. And so it didn't take long before I was like, I'm not strong enough, I can't handle this, so I cashed it out and moved the money somewhere else where I didn't have to worry about it. I'm sure I spent it on my kids, but the point is that it was amazing to me how instantly my heart was suddenly wrapped up in these things that didn't matter to me a day before. But now they were all focused on it because my treasure was there. When we actually invest in insecticide, when we invest, that's a bad joke about the moth. When we put our money into kingdom things, your heart goes there. My money is here, it's God's money that he gave us, but I'm putting money into this, and so now I deeply care about what the church is doing and how we're reaching people, and I care about the things that Jesus cares about, because that's where my money is. That's why Jesus wants us to give, is to have our hearts follow where they belong, not have our hearts wrapped up in stuff and in portfolios and in stuff that at the end of the day is not going to matter. We can't take with us. And so what I want to just kind of leave you with as we head into groups and talk about this is just kind of that question I brought up before. Are you trusting God practically with your money? And whether you aren't at all, you are a little bit, or you're wherever you are, is there anywhere that God is prompting you to take another step in that direction? Is there something you've been holding back from him, or something that oh no, not my Maserati, I can't possibly get rid of my Maserati. Is there something there that you're like, man, you know what, I think my heart is wrapped up in this thing more than it needs to be, and maybe God would rather you put that into something that matters, so your heart can be there as well. Let me pray, and we'll move on. God, thank you that you love us. Thank you that you provide for us so well. God, that you've promised that just the same way you take care of birds and flowers, you will so much more take care of everything that we need. God, help us to trust that. Help us to fight the allure of putting our faith in money and bank accounts and investments and whatever. And God, that we would put our trust in you, knowing that every cent that comes into our hands comes from you ultimately. And God, that you have something so much greater for us than just getting wrapped up worried about stuff. God, we love you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.